She was the one who started the entire movement.
What happened to the nursing hat?
Why? Because poor hygiene. In 1850, actually, the first nursing school was opened in London. She joined Crimean War to care for wounded British soldiers. As long as I remember, we always had shortage of nurses.
Historically belonging to the care of the church, then entrusted to scientists and later Good Samaritans. Finally, it was managed within academic systems. No, it's not the royal crown or a family asset, but instead the sacred legacy of healthcare.
I'm here with Elena Danilova, who is our clinical director at Gurnick Academy. However, you're usually working with MRI, but you stepped in to help me with nursing history, which I really appreciate. And you researched some materials. And of course, I'm on a quest to find out what happened to the nursing hat. And I understand you're not going to tell us today, but we might tell us another time. But I do want to find out what happened to the nursing hat. But today is the history of early nursing and kind of as it related to church nursing. So often some of those nurses probably even had nun habits on rather than nursing hats, but we're going to talk about that. Can you tell me what you learned? I'm really excited to hear about early nursing.
Okay, yes. Hello. Thank you for having me today.
Yes.
And the reason why I agreed to speak about nursing, because my background is I'm a physician assistant,
Yes.
but not in the US.
Yes.
In my home country, I was physician assistant and I worked as a nurse anesthetist in neurosurgery emergency.
And you're more than qualified to speak on all of these topics. Yes.
It's interesting. However, my second profession and my passion is MRI.
Okay.
So yes, and right now I do clinical development because Gurnick Academy grows tremendously and we need more clinical affiliates because we have more students and we're growing. So that's why, about the history of nursing.
Yes.
That history is amazing. Its history is like history of the human being because first mention about nursing was noted in some paper during the Roman Empire.
Okay.
It was 300 and I believe like 500 Anno Domini,
Yes.
which
means AD.
Yes, not before Christ, BC, like after Christ.
Okay.
Yes, and during Roman Empire, so actually emperor, he attempted to build a hospital in each prominent or at least large city.
So can I ask you, was that
Sure.
kind of was that kind of a status thing? Like our town has a prestigious hospital.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, of course, because
We have a library, we have a hospital.
Right.
Okay.
Roman Empire, it was, we all know that it was great civilization.
Okay.
And they were rich, they were very influential.
Yeah.
Yes, they educated themselves, they cared about themselves, and it's a human nature to care
Yes.
about each other, about those who love, who is sick. So in my opinion, it didn't change much.
Okay.
However, that's why they wanted to build hospitals. Of course, the word hospital came out later. It was just like places where citizens took care of sick citizens. And then...
but not like our sophistication today. Like they were dealing more with like wash your hands, right? Because there's germs. Or
it came
take a
out
bath.
later when in 19th century.
Yeah.
Nightingale, she came with idea.
Florence
Nightingale, yes. When she joined as a nurse, she joined Crimean War to care for her wounded British soldiers.
Yes.
So she noticed that even not prominent wounds, they were fatal for soldiers. Why? Because poor hygiene.
So if you didn't die in the war, you would die from the wound after the war.
Exactly. Well, and it still takes place, during my time. Sorry for that little flashback. During my time as a nurse anesthetist, sometimes when, shortage of nurse, as long as I remember, we always had shortage of nurses. And I remember that people who broke their neck and they didn't die from, let's say, that injury. They died from wounds, for sore wounds, because poor circulation, so it still takes place.
Today, even.
I'm speaking about at least like 25 years ago it was, yes.
Okay.
And again, maybe not here in America, maybe not in other countries which have not that sophisticated
That's just
healthcare.
shocking to me that those issues still exist. But we're talking really early nursing, rudimentary skill sets.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's, unfortunately, that idea to build hospitals were postponed until 800s AD.
Okay.
And then the idea was revived. Yes.
Okay. And were they called hospitals?
They called hospitals.
They actually were called hospitals. Okay. Wow. Okay. So they were now officially in a time frame. There were hospitals now. And then what were those like? And
at least, since it was in European countries.
Okay.
Back then, they didn't have just one unique word, hospital. So, because like, for example, hospital, it sounds in English and German or, let's say, Dutch languages differently. Then during 10th and 11th centuries, so the idea of hospitals shifted, and mostly those hospitals were based on religious establishment, like churches or the monastery, and who took care for patients were monks, nuns, and volunteers.
So today, when we drive past St. Pete's or something, there's an affiliation of sorts between religion and hospitals. But back then, they were being really run by priests and nuns.
Yes.
So there was
they were like predecessors.
Duty of the church at large. Okay.
We still have a hospital of St. Jude.
Yeah.
Or St. Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So being run by priests and nuns. How did that work?
Well, it worked well because nothing else works. Nobody else.
No competition.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It was monopoly. So nobody took care of that. However, in 17th century, as far as I remember, because the history of nursing is so deep and prominent and it's huge. I think there should be like a special person who is a nursing historian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who tells the story.
Yeah.
But anyway, in 17th century, since the way how Europe was ruled, the healthcare, if I can say healthcare.
Loosely say
absolutely.
Healthcare.
It's changed.
Or sick care.
Exactly. Yeah. Sick care. So because they didn't care for health people, it was exactly sick care. Yeah. So yes, in 17th centuries, it changes.
Okay.
And most of care became, and when we'll later maybe talk about the healthcare and nursing in America, so it became less dependent on Catholic Church.
Okay.
But mostly shifted to home-run facilities.
So kind of out of the church's hands now, kind of into your home facility.
Yeah,
so if your family cared for you, you were in good shape. If your family didn't care for you, not so much.
Exactly. Because in Middle Age, church actually ruled the world. Yeah. So church had, I'm speaking about Middle Ages. So church actually had more influence than let's say, king or queen had, or parliament.
So this is all tied into history, really, nursing, because the church had the predominant power.
Absolutely.
So whoever had the power had the healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In 1850, I believe, that Florence Nightingale, when she changed her view of how sick care should be. So
Florence Nightingale literally set the whole game in another motion.
Yes, and it was so effective. So it was that aspect, and I would say the idea was adopted, by American sick care. Mostly it was doctors.
So we adopted that model.
We adopted that model, yes.
In the Crimean War.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And we still healthcare has 3 tiers of nursing.
Elena, would you say that Florence Nightingale was the one that said, this is a respected profession, this is the
She
standards,
was the
these
one,
are the... She changed that landscape.
Yes,
Okay.
she did. And
Okay.
actually, she was the one who started the entire movement
Okay.
toward having professional nursing education
And standards.
and standards. Exactly, yes.
Okay. What did that start to look like?
It started looks like, first of all, medicine. It means hygiene is number 1 priority. Everything should be clean. How do we
Yeah.
start? Yes, when we step in the hospital, what do we do? First, we wash our hands, right?
Okay.
And the way how wounds should be cleaned and drainaged, and the care, standards changed. Yes.
So would it be safe to say until that point, I heard it, and I didn't know if it was just an urban legend or what, but that she would emphasize to surgeons, could you just wash your hands before the surgery?
Well, you know what? I think it was not her. As far as I remember, it was I think he was microbiologist List. So
Okay.
he created standards to wash hands. However, she started it.
Okay.
She changed the point of view and the role of hygiene
Okay.
on mortality.
Okay.
And when surgeons and doctors, they saw it, they had to adapt it because results spoke for itself.
So the mortality went up as these standards were implemented.
Mortality went down.
As
Mhm.
the standards were
Absolutely,
implemented
yes.
that she helped provide and that others built on. Okay, so then what did that begin to look like at that point historically?
Well, this would be absolutely a separate conversation.
Separate podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Separate
Well, we've got you
podcast.
back this week for one more, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we can talk more about
Okay.
that.
But on
because-
this one,
Yeah, so Florence, she influenced in 1850, actually, the first nursing school was opened in
Wow.
London,
in 1850.
1850.
Okay, that's still relatively new.
It's new, yeah.
Wow.
And why in the US, we have that relatively new history, young, because America is a young country.
Yeah.
So it's just like a little bit more than 300 years old. So it's nothing compared to, let's say, Africa or Europe.
Oh.
So that's why, yes. And in the US, actually, I'm run ahead of you.
Keep going.
So in the US, we had first 3 nursing schools opened in, I believe, 1854 through 59, if I'm not mistaken.
That's still relatively modern.
It's relatively new,
Yeah.
yes.
And these were the first nursing schools.
First nursing
Okay.
school, I remember one was in New York, another one in Philadelphia, and third one, I don't remember.
Okay.
Sorry.
But they're actually then the idea was that they could train.
Yes.
Okay.
They train, it's very interesting because the programs were in type of apprenticeship. So all those nursing programs, they were based on the hospitals. The hospital trained those nurses. But what is interesting, the hospitals, they didn't hire them.
So they trained them, then who hired them?
And they didn't hire them. Why? Because they could not pay for that type of care. They hired very few nurses. What other nurses did? They tried to be self-employed or find their own clients. And who hired them? People who could afford home care. So nurse, even, for example, you're inpatient patient, you're in the hospital, you have your own nurse by your bedside. Or you stay at home and your family members and your relatives or whoever, like close people who are close to you, they hired you and you cared for that patient. Who provided bed care for those people who could not afford?
Or didn't have family.
Or didn't have family, who could not afford a nurse? Nursing students. Can
So
you
the
believe
nursing
it?
students filled
Nursing
the
students
gap.
cared for, yes, nursing students cared for patients mostly. And then
Okay.
after graduation, they became private nurses. That's how in the early American nursing history, it was like nursing home care. It changed much later, and just because of that urbanization and needs for more and more and more nurses, that's how hospitals, they started hiring more nurses, and nursing became official profession.
So the rich have the sort of the cream of the crop nurses. The average person has family, and the poor person with no family or resources generally then has the
I think
student.
it didn't change much.
Right.
It's like, yeah.
Right. I was
Not in medical field,
drawing
but,
the parallels there
yeah.
too.
Mhm.
Okay. And then when did nursing really become sophisticated?
It's in later 19th century.
Okay. And that's when we saw more hospitals, more development.
Yes, more hospitals and nursing schools. And so hospitals, they hired those students who graduated from those nursing programs.
Okay. And then we see it standardized with accreditation standards and NCLEX. When did we
Accreditation
see
standards
the NCLEX?
actually came even later in 20th century.
Okay. And
So
then there's
yes,
a standard
more
you
it's
meet this.
when profession evolved, and when nursing profession became more and more involved in other aspects of healthcare. For example, before it was just general nursing care, and then pediatrics or obstetrics nursing. Then let's say
Specialized.
exactly
Okay.
a lot of specialization. Like right now we have radiology nurse, oncology nurse practitioners,
Yeah.
like dental nurses. So nurses are involved in so many aspects of healthcare.
And that specialization came around what time frame then? Just relatively
You know what?
new,
It's
right?
it's during that I would say 1940s, 1950s. I might be wrong. You know,
Yeah.
to be honest, I need to refresh those specific dates.
But late.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
A nurse today is really what a profound doctor would have been
Yes.
even 60, 70 years ago, correct?
Yeah, because our lives becomes more sophisticated and more complex, and especially with all those technological revolution and changes, so we barely can keep up with changes, you know, like in internet offers us, or like right now, artificial intelligence. So, you know, if we have robots who perform surgeries, so what can tell about nurses? Yes. And the more human beings become educated and smarter and sophisticated, the more technology, I would say, involved in our lives. It put a lot of pressure and demands on nurses' education and their skills and their specialties.
All right. Can you tell me the most fascinating piece of what you learned in the history as you studied it and researched it? Just a 1 minute, like this was fascinating.
For me,
piece.
it was very sophisticated how in early ages people came to conclusion that they need specific people, not everyone, but specific people who could care for sick ones. It was so sophisticated. How they knew? Now I know because I have a textbook, I have a teacher, I have mentors, I have a lot of resources on the internet, I have libraries. How back then, how they knew? 300 years, AD. How did they know what to learn and which way to go? And look where we're at right now. It means those early people, they definitely knew what they were doing.
So that was the most fascinating thing that came to you, was that they knew
how it started to spring out and evolve. That Florence Nightingale, how did she notice what exactly caused that high mortality?
Yeah.
I think those people, they had a very different way of comprehension and how to understand the world. So not everybody can do it.
It's phenomenal too that each piece practiced on the last piece and built.
It's definitely
On the last piece.
evolution. Yes, people learn from mistakes.
Yeah.
People did, I cannot say the research because back then they didn't know. However, they tried and they follow the successful trial and they drop unsuccessful. Well, but it's just fascinating.
Let me ask you this. Did they learn by failure too?
Absolutely. Yes. Otherwise, how did they know what is right, what is wrong? Absolutely. Yeah. How many soldiers supposed to die until that Florence, she entered that, the battlefield and she started noticing, he had insignificant injury. However, he died. Why?
A line I read was that they called her the angel of light. So as they would lay around sick and dying after a battle, she would come with her lamp.
Yeah.
And sometimes just provide a cool cloth. But I think of that as the imagery of nursing.
It was, and why, for example, right now, nursing mother. So it doesn't mean she's a nurse. So she's the one who actually nourishing that little child, right, infant, and provide that infant with care.
Yeah.
So it was exactly what nurses did. They cared. First of all, it was not just physical, it was emotional care. So sometimes, when spirit is very low, so people just give up and they don't want to fight for their lives.
And she provided that beacon of hope.
Yes, that's why number one, in my opinion, number one requirements to be a nurse, have compassion. Yeah, that's my personal opinion.
All right. Thank you so much.
Welcome.